right, Brooke. Good afternoon. How's it going today?
Conrad, what's shaking, brother? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Can't complain. I think you said you have some more exciting life plans than I do. My kids are back in school right now. We record this. It's released a little bit later, of course, as the listener knows. But I think my is a lot less stressful because I bring my sons about 2 miles to school. I think you'd have a little bit more going on. So what's happening in your world there?
Yeah, I just got back from lovely State College, Pennsylvania. Just dropped off my youngest daughter up at Penn State, so she's beginning her junior year. But she told me, she goes, Dad, I was just talking to my counselor, and we have I only have 3 classes left to register after this semester. I was like, wait a second, you're starting your junior year, and you've got 3 classes left. So then I was like, well, that's great. You can graduate a year early. And then she goes, well, no, I've got to take an internship the following year. I'm like, wait a second, and then I want to stay up there at school. I don't want to leave. I want to graduate with all my friends. But I just thought that was funny, like an internship. She's got to pay tuition for her to work for free. So, but anyway, she's graduating a semester early, so I guess I get a little pay raise then.
Yeah, a bit of a pro there. But I remember doing an internship as well when I was in college, and it was supposed to be related to marketing. It ended up being like do free labor for our
Yes.
business, and then maybe we'll have 10 minutes of marketing at the back end. But it's okay. It taught me that maybe people will take advantage of you. So it's actually a valuable lesson to learn. Perhaps not in the sense that the college made it to be or intended it for it to be, but I did learn something from it. So awesome. Well, someone we've learned from before previously, Terry's with us here today. Brooke, I'm curious. We'll get to Terry in a second, but how did you originally connect with Terry Whyte? What was the way that you guys originally found each other?
Yeah, so we're really, first off, really excited to have Terry on. Obviously he's a legend in the industry. Everybody knows him. Obviously his in-depth reviews on software is just uncanny, and it's probably one of the best people out there for that. But yeah, I think it was through a mutual friend, Matt Landau, introduced us, and I was just thinking of this before we jumped on. It was such a great experience. Back in when I first launched Vintory, I was lucky enough to present in New Orleans, and it was like the first presentation, kind of kicking off Vintory. And Terry was in the crowd there, and I worked my butt off. I practiced. It was luckily there was a ton of people in there, and it was just the presentation went off flawlessly and went off really well. And I remember afterwards, I was so exhausted. I was walking back to our vacation rental that we rented down in New Orleans, and I got a little voice message from Matt Landau. And it was actually a recording of Terry Whyte. He was interviewing, I guess, after the conference. He was kind of part of his podcast. He was asking Terry, some feedback, and did you get any takeaways? And Terry made this comment, something to the effect of, you know what? One of the best things I saw at this conference was Brooke's presentation. And it was just the most unbelievable experience I've ever seen in my life, talking about how they started tearing down the walls, and, there's people sitting on the other side. And I was just so exhausted from, all the prep that I put into this. And it was just one of those, like, those moments that I'll never forget. It was like, because I'm like, in the, early days of a business, you don't know if you're going to make it or not. And that was kind of like that little, like, check mark of like, oh my gosh, I think we're actually going to make it here. And, I got validated from Matt Landau and from Terry Whyte. So it really made my day. And that kind of, it's funny, I still remember it. I still have that little audio clip today. And really, really grateful that, Terry said that, way back when.
Awesome. Well, Terry, I like that story. Would love to hear kind of your feedback of that originally, but also, if you don't mind, a little bit of background about you, your vacational business, what you focused on, and then we can talk about the mistakes and, what you're focused on today.
Thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been in the business a long time. I predate VRBO by just a little bit. My wife and I own some properties on Florida's Gulf Coast, and I manage about 50 of them. Been doing this for a long time. And getting back to what Brooke said, I'll never forget walking out of the RMA. Brooke, I think you were sitting at the bar, and Sandy and I were going through the lobby, and I looked over and I said, "Hey, Brooke, best presentation I've seen all week." And what was so good about it, and I still remember it to this day, was sitting in there and you could hear all the rumblings. You couldn't see people, but you could just hear them out there. And then there was a big partition wall there that they decided to remove because there were so many people that wanted in that couldn't get in. So they take down this wall, and on the other side of the wall, there's another room that it makes it twice as big as the room that we were in. And to this day, at any VR, any conference, I've never seen anything like it. So that was quite the experience.
I still get chills even just telling that story, Terry. That's cool.
Yeah, and really nobody either was in the owner acquisition part of this business at that time either. So all of it, like, it was so new to us. It was so exciting. It was it looked like, it just had so much traction coming, which it did too. So it was just a real good time in our industry.
Yeah. I feel like too, Brooke, a lot changed because that was in 2019, right? That was kind of the last VRMA before they were canceled for, I feel like, a year, right? And then when we brought back, it was a lot smaller. It wasn't the same thing. So the timing was almost strangely perfect in a way where like you got that message out there before things were about to get a lot harder for in-person conferences for a little while there. Now it's kind of back to normal, I guess, in some respect. But
yeah, no, absolutely. It, I guess it was right about a little about over a year after that word, kind of COVID hit, and it was good experience all around and a great way to kick off the business.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Terry, let's dive into the mistakes then. So the goal of kind of today's conversation and, the past guests that we've had on the show is to highlight the mistakes that you contributed to the book. And, we were just talking, of course, as we always do before we hit record. And, really, I think you mentioned jokingly that you could have easily done 20 mistakes. If Brooke had tasked you with 20, you could have written 20. But of course, these are the 10 that you selected here. So if you're cool with it, we'll dive right in. Number one, not realizing I had to spend money to make money. So maybe walk me through that process. What's your thought process today with regards to investing in your business and what things have turned into positive ROIs for you as you've scaled and grown the business?
It's still the number one lesson that I've learned. You have to spend money to make it. And the two lessons that I've learned in this industry, the two biggest lessons I've learned is the one I learned myself, which is that you have to spend money to make it. The number two is advice a friend gave me. He's a multimillionaire. When Sandy and I stayed on his 100-foot houseboat, we stayed downstairs in one of the bedrooms. And he said to me, I was telling him a story about an owner, and he looked at me and he said, people do strange things when it comes to money. And it's something I've never forgot, to this day. And then, so that was really good advice that somebody had given me. I still cherish it. And then the one that you have to spend money to make it, and I'll give you why that is. If you look at the 10 or 11 core components of a tech stack, of a business plan, or something like that. So if we look at which I consider these are the 10 core components, it would be the PMS, the website, your booking engine, distribution, operations, revenue management, your CRM, guest relations, communications, home automation, digital marketing, and owner acquisition. Every single one of spending money to make money is you touch every single one of those components right there. And if you're not willing to do that, if you don't realize that, if you're not committed to doing that, it directly affects every single one of those components. So to me, you don't really have a business plan if you're not willing, to spend money to make it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of parallels. I actually was going through my mistakes the other day and going through these, and one of them was not really understanding kind of that ROI component, not understanding the holy grail of all metrics, and it's LTV to CAC, right? Lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. And it doesn't matter. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased. I do it more for owner acquisition, but you can do the same math on a guest, right? What does it cost you to acquire that guest? And what is the lifetime value of that guest? And it's not just one stay. There's multiple stays. So understanding that relationship, understanding how the math works was a big fault. It's otherwise known as ROI, but it was a fault that I had as well. And it sounds like I'm in good company with you too.
Like, I guess the way I think about it too, Terry, is that each one of those things you can, looking for value is not the same thing as looking for the cheapest price. Like, and I've certainly encountered people over my years in the space, I'm sure you have as well, who, well, let me sign up for the cheapest software, PMS platform. Well, this one's a little bit cheaper than this one. Let me go that way. Or, this marketing agency is cheaper than that one. Let me sign up for the owner acquisition. Let me send the cheap, crappy postcards, not the ones that look nicer, that have a better quality, look and feel to them. And it's kind of like those, I guess the way I think about it is those decisions kind of stack up, over, and when it's all said and done, like you've cheaped out and cut a lot of corners, you end up with a pretty bad product at the end of the day. But you don't think that when you're making that one decision. You think, I'm just kind of saving a few bucks here and there, but it can kind of go the wrong way. So value is not cost, right? These are different things.
What does it cost you, right? What is that? Those little tiny shavings of a couple bucks here and there. What does it cost you in the end?
It's like baking a cake or anything, right? Like you use the worst flour, like the worst, materials, you don't cook it the right amount of time. It's like by the end of the day, the cake is just terrible, right? Like it takes all these things to put it together where it really works well.
Conrad, I've got a good story for you. Here is, you probably don't know this, but this is something I'll never forget, and it changed my whole business plan, was the first year that Sandy and I retired and we spent the whole winter in Florida. I came to you and I said, can you look at my website? I want to hire you as my digital marketing person. and you looked at, and you came back to me, and I'll never forget this. I was all excited. It was our first winter in Florida. I'm on a conference call with you, and I'm looking out the window, and I could see the kayaks going by, and the dolphins were, and this, I thought, this is great. And you said to me, Terry, I've looked at your website and said, I can't help you. There's no way. Yeah, there's no way with what you have that I can help you. But the moral to the story is that was the time right there. I made the decision. I was starting from scratch. I was starting over. I changed my PMS. I changed my website. I changed my CRM. I changed everything in my business right there on the spot. And I've never looked back. And, it cost me a lot of money, but it's the best money I've ever spent because it took me to a level I thought I could never reach.
Yeah. I didn't want to break the fourth wall too bad. Obviously, it's the Vintory podcast here that I'm helping Brooke on. But it's one of those things, I think, Terry, where I've always tried to be honest in that respect with people.
Yeah.
When I look at it and I don't feel like I'm going to be able to do what I need to get done. I mean, we don't need to mention the PMS company you're with at the time if you don't want to, but we just couldn't work with that website, right? We couldn't make the changes we wanted to make. We couldn't modify the website. We couldn't market it. And when you're in that situation, I feel like the only intellectually honest thing for me to do is be like, I just don't think it's going to be a good path forward, right? Like we're going to be, trying to put a square peg in a round hole, if you want to think of it that way. And, I've had many of those conversations over the years, Terry. Very few people actually do what you did, which is swallow the tough pill and make the changes necessary to come back and, build a better foundation, if you will. And those that do, I think like you come out on the other side of it a lot stronger, but it's hard to do that, right? And Brooke, the same thing could apply to homeowner marketing. If you give someone advice on homeowner marketing should work in this way and they don't make those changes and they kind of forge ahead with a bad plan, they're going to end up with a pretty bad outcome too, right? So it kind of applies to both sides of the coin, I'm sure.
Yep.
Owner acquisition through word of mouth isn't a real good strategy.
It only gets you so far, right? That's Awesome. Well, let's go over to number 2 then, keep things kind of sliding around here. So number 2, not being properly insured. Would love to hear your perspective on how you have since properly insured yourself, what you're approaching today with insurance and how you've felt that's kept you more protected.
I operated many years without insurance, if you can believe it. And then, I had some people come to me, and one of my owners, he very wealthy guy. He owns several retirement old age homes. And something happened at one of his properties, and he said, "You're insured, right?" And I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "Terry, you got to take this serious." And so right then, that was a huge mistake. Could have cost me a lot of money, could have brought me down, and you learn, from mistakes you made.
What do you recommend, Terry? Well, I mean, there's obviously so many different types of. You can get insurance for anything, business interruption, and everything. What do you recommend, and what do you have?
What I just went to people. First thing I did, I went to my lawyer, and I said, "Listen, I need insurance." He's a pretty resourceful guy. He's helped me a lot over the years. And he said, "I know this person, you need to call him." And it's called Boyd Insurance in Florida. So I went to them. I just said, "I've got 50 properties. I need to be insured." So they said, "Okay, this is best." They insure many different vacation rental companies in Florida. And so they kind of walked me through it. This is what you need. And that's where I ended up.
Got it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you think about it, I know we have cybersecurity insurance, and there's business interruption. I mean, think about all the people in Maui that that got devastated by the fires, or even random things. Yeah. I think I did a post about this. It's like the black swan events. Here's the thing: the only thing for certain is a black swan event will happen every 7 to 10 years. You just don't know what it's going to be. I mean, who could have predicted COVID? Who could have predicted the BP oil spill for the people down in the Gulf? These are type of things that are going to happen, but I guess it's at a certain point you can over-insure yourself, and you insure for yourself for every single possibility. But obviously, insurance companies are making money, and their house is a lot bigger than mine, so I know they win. Those premiums add up in the end. So I guess it's balancing what is the right amount of insurance and what are those different areas that you do need to get covered on.
Yes, and being without insurance is not an option. So that was a big mistake. And it took me way too long, to overcome.
It's like you definitely, to Brooke's point, it's like you need something. The question is, do you need small, medium, or large? Maybe it sounds like, Terry, what you're saying is you got, you were completely exposed, right, in some respect there, and certainly that's suboptimal. If anything were to happen, in that spot.
Waited way too long for sure.
Yeah, yeah, right on. Okay, so kind of on the other side of the coin, then going to number three, if you're cool with that, waited too long to adapt to revenue management. So maybe is this more on like the dynamic pricing side of things? Maybe talk me through how you do some of your revenue management today, what tools you use, and how you've been successful in that approach.
I was in the business for 25 years, more years when I was doing it. I was pricing myself. I thought I really knew the market. I knew my own market, really well, which I did, but I didn't know it well enough, and I was pricing it myself. And I always struggled in my off season, which is I'm into it now. That's when the kids go back to school in August and then up to Christmas. And then my properties are at or near 100% capacity from Christmas until August, when the kids go back to school. But the mistake I was making, even as well as I knew the market, and I was pretty successful, but when I started using dynamic pricing, and in that includes key data, that kind of keep them honest, with a scrape data kind of thing there. You got to be careful what you get into there. But to be quite honest with you, my rates were too low in peak season and they were too high in my shoulder season. I really always struggled in my shoulder season. And once I adapted dynamic price, started listening to them, started researching key data, making sure everything, my shoulder season has never been as painful as what it was. And in fact, I've had some really good shoulder seasons, so it was a valuable, even as well as long as I've been in the business and thought I knew my market, that technology really was doing a better job than I was.
Well, Terry, you and I have been in this business so long that, like, when we first started, there was no such thing as revenue management other than doing it manually, right? Like just going in and just kind of, and that's like when I first started, I remember doing that. We had this silly little algorithm that we somehow created, and we kind of hacked a way to do revenue management with the live res system back then. The Beyond Pricing wasn't around. None of the Wheelhouse obviously wasn't around. None of these companies were there. Um, you know, Price Labs, it just we had to do it manually and so on. So I guess that's like a badge of honor. It's a little bit of the OG. But I will say, as obviously, we run Terry's owner acquisition marketing, and like his numbers, one of the differentiators he has. I mean, he crushes the competition, and we highlight that. And it's obviously, I'm sure you do a great job of marketing, but obviously you are dialed in, I think, on revenue management now because you are overachieving, really all the other competitors in that market by a long shot.
I do have the data to prove how I outperform my competition for sure, but I am using, this is how committed I am to it. I am using key data plus I'm using 3 different pricing tools.
Wow.
And I only have 50 properties. Some people have 500, some people have 1,000. And I found sometimes I have to use 2 different pricing tools to price a duplex. It can be, although they're good at what they do, there's some hiccups along the way, and some are better at for why they're better at some properties than another. I don't know. I can't explain it. They just are. But I'm in tune with it, and if they are, well, I'm on board.
How do you do that, Terry? Like, I mean, are you connecting them all, and that you ultimately you get all the information, you ultimately kind of decide what the rates are, or how are you actually managing? The logistics of that just makes my head spin right now.
Yeah. Okay. So what you can do is, first of all, you have to rely. Key data is the market driver. So it doesn't matter what the pricing tools say. First of all, it's key data. So then you have to kind of see. But what you do, answer your question directly, Brooke, is you upload all your properties to all. Actually, I use 4 different pricing tools, but I don't use the one that my PMS owns. So I don't use it. But I use the other 3. But what you do is you open an account, you upload all your inventory to it. And then you can pick and choose which ones you turn live or turn on. And what I do, to be quite honest with you, primarily I use Price Labs, but I find in peak season, I have a handful of properties that do better on Wheelhouse in peak season. So I use them up to peak season. Then when I start getting into now, July and August, and things start slowing down, I find Wheelhouse, they're kind of high, compared to Price Labs. And so what I'll do is I'll just switch them up and I'll switch them over to Price Labs. And then when it comes this year, December, January, I'll switch them back on to, so, and then I really like Beyond Pricing. I really like their technology too. I think it's good. The problem with them is, of course, giving up 1% of your revenue, which I would never do. But they have really good, I think, they were my first pricing tool. My account manager at the time, he taught me a lot of what I know about how to price inventory. So I have really nothing but respect for Beyond Pricing too.
Well, obviously it works because, again, I've seen your metrics and I see how you overachieve the market. And there's, I guess, a takeaway is, if you are overachieving and you are beating the market, highlight it. Use that as one of your key differentiators when you go to actually send marketing out, because it is an important stat that obviously people want to see. Rather than so many people, when they're sending out owner acquisition marketing, it's all platitudinal. It's, we've got the best channel management, we've got the best this and that, and we're the nicest people, and concierge and white glove cleaning, all this other stuff that you can't quantify. Well, guess what? You can quantify those kind of numbers, and when you can prove it, it's going to definitely help your response and your marketing.
Owner acquisition, that's probably the key there to owner acquisition, is when you have the data to prove how you're outperforming the market. That's pretty hard to beat that.
Highlight it.
Yeah. Less opinion based and more fact based, which I think that is the hard part. I think you nailed it, Brooke, with a lot of the owner acquisition side of it, is that the person receiving that message, if they don't believe that you're credible, then no matter what you say, it's going to go in one ear and out the other, right? Well, you're just saying that. Well, you can show screenshots and proof. I've seen some of Terry's creative, screenshots and proof and things like that on the Vintory assets he's sending out. That does build more credibility because you're showing, more of that data that kind of helps you tie it together. Well, maybe that actually goes nicely then, Terry, into number 4, which is number 4, waited way too long to focus on digital marketing. I guess we already broke the fourth wall earlier, and you talked about kind of what you did there. But I know it's not just the work that we do together, Terry. I think there's other things that you're doing outside of that, or you kind of built more systems around the digital marketing. So maybe walk me through that. What do you do outside of your relationship with?
When I said number 1 there, you have to spend money to make it. I can't think of a better example. When you're doing digital marketing, you're either going to be an OTA, WHRE, or you're not. If you ever plan on not being that person, it really comes down to, and then what comes down to your PMS, your booking engine. So when you have your website comes first, then you take people to your website, then they go to book your property, your booking engine better be working, your PMS better be working. So, and when you hire your digital marketing team, and I did this last year at my presentation at VRMA with you, Conrad, I said, you should know who your digital marketing team is going to be before you pick your website builder. So I remember when I was going to IC&D, built my latest website, and I remember going to you before I made the decision. And I said, are you okay with this? This is my plan. This is what I'm going to do. And I went to Evan. Remember when Evan he left our industry and he went to, and he went to X, now he's with X. So he was part of, the AI movement. So I went to him and I went to you and I said, this is my plan. I said, do I have your blessing? They said, yes. So, if you're going to, but when you go to digital marketing team or you're going to use AI, you have to be able to hand off the tools to them, because that's really where I exit there. Like I say, okay, here's my website, here's my PMS, here's my CRM. It's all up to you now. I gave you the tools. Now you got to perform. I did everything I can do. So that's where it comes into digital marketing. You have to be able to put your digital marketing team in a position to succeed.
Yeah. Well said. I like that one. Well, number 5 then, I think going kind of on the other side. So Brooke, probably more to say on this one. Number 5, not having a clear owner acquisition strategy. So obviously you mentioned some of the work that you've done previously with Vintory, but it's more than just that, right? Like you've kind of changed your approach a little bit to how you're attracting owners, and you've grown significantly. I mean, when we started together, Terry, I think I recall 22, 23, 4 listings, somewhere in that range on the site. You mentioned you're kind of right at that 50 mark today. So what's kind of been some of the things that have helped that growth on the owner acquisition side of it?
I never spent a dime on owner acquisition until I joined Vintory. And every property that I've gained has been through either Vintory or an idea, which, Brooke, I remember you telling me it's got to be some kind of proposal. So I went to my cleaning staff, I went to my handyman, I went to my owners. I said, listen, anybody who joins my property, I'm giving you $1,000. It's going right in. You won't believe how that has motivated people to go to bat for me. If they know that I'm giving, but I would have never thought of something like that. That's a Vintory strategy, so and again, the way I've always grown, and I've been in business for 30 years and I only have 50 properties. So that's not, they're really not good numbers. So, word of mouth is not a good strategy. You need to spend money on owner acquisition. And that was a mistake I made a long, long time ago. Should have.
One of my favorite quotes is Charlie Munger, God rest his soul, Warren Buffett's business partner. He says, "Show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome." Right? If you
Ah,
incentivize, your cleaners, your team, whoever happens to be, I've seen people actually print out little cards, little business cards, and they actually have a little referral code on there, and it goes back to the cleaner. If somebody signs up, they'll actually get it. And here's the thing, and this is, I've thought about this a lot, and people are afraid to pay referral fees. And like, I remember even when I started, we were like, I was negotiating with a realtor for a $50,000 property, and I was reluctant to pay $500. Like, come on. Like, now I would kill to have a CAC, a customer acquisition cost of $500. Like, that is
yes,
like, I mean, you think about it. If you're netting 10% on that property in year one in net profits, that means you're making $5,000 in year one. If you're paying $500, like, that means your first year you're a 10x ROI. Just the first year, not counting the year 2 through 10 that you're going to keep that property in your rental program. So again, it goes back to your first point in that LTV, the holy grail of all metrics, that LTV to CAC ratio. And typically, what we say is, as long as you can recover your CAC recovery in that first year of profits, like, you're home free. So again, taking the same example as before, if you have a $50,000 property in gross booking revenue per year, you're going to net on average. The average company's going to net about $5,000 or 10% of that. That's $5,000. As long as your customer acquisition cost is that $5,000 or less, that 12-month CAC recovery, you are home free. Like, you should be taking, because you're making profits in year 2 through 10, and you can take it to the bank. But again, very, very few people understand those metrics.
You said something there, Brooke, about real estate agents, and everything that I've learned through Vintory and strategies and stuff like that. I would have to say that getting together, having a relationship with somebody in real estate is the ace in the hole. I was doing really well there. It was before interest rates hit 6%, and most of the investors that I know that I've been talking to, it made sense when it was 4%. When we got up to 6-7%, the bottom kind of fell out of it, and they're kind of waiting. But before it got to 6%, and having a relationship with real estate agents is, I probably think it's the best thing you can do.
Yeah, well, it's residual business. It's not just one and done. If you get in with a good realtor, that agent is going to send you tons of deals. And that was one of the reasons, when I was at Vantage, we actually partnered with a couple of real estate agents. They had a lock. They were selling like 98% of all the inventory in one of the communities we really wanted to go after. So my original strategy was to go build a real estate team. And after a year of that, I said, screw this. So we just partnered with this real estate, these two guys that were selling so much real estate. And we just got all the referrals, and that was a way we accelerated our growth. And then after I sold Vantage and I went down to Orlando, I spent most of my time literally just whining and dining real estate agents, because they were the source of leads. I mean, we would take them to lunch just about every day. We would take them to dinners, really nice fancy dinners, all the time, because the properties they were throwing to us were throwing off $150,000-$200,000 in top line gross booking revenue. So a $200-$300 meal was nothing in the grand scheme of things. And it's amazing what people will do if you give them a nice steak at Ruth's Chris.
Yeah. And then going back to what you said there about having the metrics to prove it, saying that your numbers, and where I'm going with this is, hardly anybody that buys property on the island where I am buys it for personal use. It's all for investment, and a lot of them, they're mortgaged. They have to make payments. They can't lose money. It can't come out of their account. So they need income. So if you have confidence and you have an agent that says, I've got the guy, look at his numbers, and I would say, okay, show me your numbers for the last 2 years. And because if they come to me, they're going to 2 or 3, 4 other, they've interviewed 4 other rental companies, so I just, pull up the numbers for the last 2 years and let's have a look at them.
Yeah.
Yep. And then if you got a real estate agent, because they know that it's their reputation too. If they're selling a property and they're promising that you're going to make income, you're going to be able to make your payments, it matters to them too.
Yeah.
It's a reputation.
Yeah, we had I remember in the early days of Vintory, there was one of our partners that they had a person at their front desk that would literally just sit there. They would greet people as they came in. But mostly what they did is they were just trolling the MLS, and they would send an email to every single property that came online, that they thought was going to be a good property in their rental program. And they just sent a little email to the real estate agent saying, hey, we think this will be a great property. Congratulations, your new listing, 123 Maple Street. We think it'll be a great property in our rental program. Would you like me to share a rental projection with you? So we actually developed that. We actually developed a tool that does that exact same thing, but it hooks directly with the realtor.com and the MLS, and it automatically emails them. So it's kind of like taking care of that. It's amazing how that works as far as, getting it's your foot in the door with that agent. But again, to your point, to Terry, you have to back it up. You got to back it up with good data, and you got to be a good operator. You can't just be a crappy operator and expect to get this business, or you maybe get one deal on that.
Numbers mean everything.
Yeah. Certainly no agent's going to be thrilled if, they refer 4 properties your way and then then they have a bad experience. They're going to go, well, I'm not going to give you more. So I think you guys nailed it there. It's, it can build up that pipeline of new business, but you've got to earn it, right? It's certainly not guaranteed long-term if you're not delivering. So I think that's a good way to think about it. I'm going to combo 6 and 7, Terry, because I don't think many people talked about this one, but domain names. It doesn't trigger a previous episode where we talked to someone about domain names, but as a lover of domain names, I actually like this one quite a bit, Terry. So your 6th one was not securing competitors' domain names when you have the opportunity to do so. Would love to hear the story on that. And then number 7, getting more of your own domain names, websites that you could use and things like that. So talk to me about domain names. What do you do today, and what's the story about the competitor domain name?
Domains to me, Conrad, you probably don't remember this, but Brooke, you would. Do you remember when domain names meant something? Do you remember at the time when everything on Yahoo, the same results were on Google until they separated there? I forget how many years ago was that, but I secured the domain name Anne Condo Rentals. I had one property. Google, to this day, Conrad, you have it. It only has 3 properties. But to this day, you can type in almost any keyword on Anne Island search, and Anne Island Condo Rentals with 3 properties will come up on the first page. For some reason, they love that domain name. At one time, domain names really meant something, especially on Yahoo. But and I've had people come to me. I own some domain names, and they said, "We'll give you $50,000 for that." It cost me $10. Cost me $10 a year. But I really missed an opportunity when I was starting out there. When the internet became big there, I could have secured some really good domains, and I didn't. And my competition owns them now. So I probably own 50 domain names. So it cost me quite a bit of money. I don't do anything with them. I'm just sitting on them. I hope somebody someday will pay me for them. But I'll give you another example. Where Sandy and I own 3 properties in this one complex. It's called Golf Watch. So snowbirds come year after year after year, and it's been there for 35 years. So Golf Watch is a huge, well-known complex on the island. I own the domain. So now when they type in, Conrad, we created a landing page for Golf Watch.
Mini site.
Yeah. It's just a mini site. And it's just stuff like that, just owning the mini. And the association, the HOA, which I'm on the board there, but they're actually not real happy with me because they've came to me like 10 times and said, listen, will you sell us the domain? We could use it, for our owner, not marketing, but communication, and all that stuff. And I said, I'll never sell you that name. So stop asking, because I own that name and I'll never sell it. So it can, at the time there, I missed a lot of opportunities where I could have secured, and I know people would have paid me a lot of money to have them right now.
Yeah. We did the same thing, Terry. So this was a great strategy I did it originally for guests, but it ended up becoming an owner acquisition strategy. It was the microsite strategy. So there was, Ocean City is a 9-mile sandbar, with 20,000 condos on it. But realistically, there was like 5 or 6 buildings and communities we really wanted to break into. So what I ended up doing is, when we found those 5 or 6 buildings and they were doing, 3 to 4x the top line revenue, and they were newer buildings, so you had less complaints from guests and things like that, we bought the domains. So, and we actually even went as far as creating different logos, Sunset Island Rentals or Belmont Oceancity.com, and it almost felt like it was the official site. It's a little bit of a hack, but it almost felt like it was the official rental company of that building, of that community. And what ended up happening is I did it for SEO, and it worked great from, getting guests. But what ended up happening is the owners wanted to be there. And at the very bottom, it said this site is, exclusive for Vantage Resort Realty, only, properties. So what happened is, because it became number 1 on SEO from a guest perspective, the owners wanted to get there. Well, the only way the owners could get on that website was listing their property with Vantage Resort Realty. So that microsite, and luckily we were at LiveRes at the time. LiveRes was really easy to spin off microsites. So I was the king of microsites. I think I had like a dozen of them. I mean, I remember Josh over there in Hearst. He always hated whenever I call him. I was, all right, Josh, I want to start up another microsite. He's like, God, come on. But it really worked. It was a great strategy. And I know there's some companies down in Orlando that do the same thing. As soon as a new community is built, they quickly go out there and grab the domain, and it ends up becoming a great source of new owner leads, and then also guests as well.
Yeah, and a mistake I made there too when I first started out, when I incorporated the business as Anne Island Beach Rentals. And then so I incorporated, and then I went to buy the domain, and of course it wasn't available. Somebody else owned it. So I bet you I went 10 years and I looked at it every day. And then the guy who owned it finally decided to sell it. I could have bought it for like $3 at the time, and I ended up paying $2,000 for it. So he said, give me $2,000. I said, you want $2,000? I'll gladly give it. I've been looking for 10 years to buy this site. So, I would have paid double that, so, but I do own some domains. Would never surprise me if somebody came to me and made me, 50,000 or more offer on.
Yeah.
It hasn't happened.
That's the thing I think. Yeah. It's one of those things, Terry. I think I try to convince people of this at times on the marketing side. And, to your point, Brooke, the homeowner side is even another angle to it. But from a guest marketing perspective, these exact match domains, I agree, they don't have quite the same power that they used to. It used to be if you had the exact match domain, it was kind of like this meal ticket to the top of the search results. Certainly not the case anymore. You could have an exact match domain and it's no guarantee of success. But boy, it does go a long way compared to not having it, right? Like there's so much more implied authority and things like that. Link building's easier and so on and so forth. So when we have clients that have great domain names, I think it's an asset, just like anything, right? And that has value associated with it, and you can get a lot of additional benefits from it. So, love the domain name discussion because I could spend a whole hour on that, but I'll be respectful of time and we can move on. But a good clip that I can send to people later on if they go, hey, what do you think about the domain name? This person wants a few $1,000s for it. And sometimes the answer is that's a screaming deal and you should absolutely do it before they change their mind and realize how valuable it is to own like an areaname.com. Just real quick, we have a story. A client that I think we had worked with before, Brooke, he's out in Harpers Ferry. Someone was trying to broker harpersferry.com, West Virginia, wanted 100,000. He thought that was ridiculous. I'm like, that may not be ridiculous. It feels like a lot, but like if you were to own that.com and you could have all that traffic over a very long period of time, a 10-year period, that really may not be an unreasonable fee, to kind of get some value out of it for sure. So,
well, look, we'll talk about it on another episode when we have David Angotti back, but how the story about how he bought SmokyMountains.com was so
stole it. Someone should arrest that man for how little he paid for that thing.
And Brooke, you said that I could have bought, when I was starting out, I could have bought AnnaMariaIsland.com.
Oh my God. What is that worth now? I mean, that's got to be a six-figure domain now easily.
Easily. Yeah. I could have bought that for $3.99 probably.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, the funny part is I have some clients who actually were ahead of the curve a little bit, right? I have a client who owns like his cityname.com, but then he didn't keep going. Like he bought that one cityname.com in his market. So like kudos to him, but then he didn't go down and buy more. And I joke with him sometimes, Phil, and I'll be like, Phil, how'd you do that? How'd you like see the vision and then stop? It's like you bought one share of Apple in 1980. You could have bought, 50 shares of Apple or 100 shares of Apple. And he's not an impoverished man, let's say, but he thinks, I should have, I learned my lesson on that one. So there's always more opportunities.
Modern day real estate, right?
Yeah,
exactly. In some ways, absolutely. Awesome. Well, next one, you've kind of touched on this, Terry. I don't know if we need to expand a lot more on it, but not having the best website you can afford. So kind of talking about kind of upgrading that website, having good experience on it. Anything else to add on that one, or is that a pretty good description of what we talked about so far?
If you're serious about direct bookings, that's where it really comes in. And direct bookings really means digital marketing. We've already talked about this, the importance of handing it off to your digital marketing team and say, I did the best I can do. Now it's up to you. So it's critical is having the best website you can afford. And as someone that sits in the marketing seat, it's like driving the Ferrari versus driving the busted down Honda Civic, right? Like one of those is going to perform a lot better. And converts. That's a big thing. Like when you give it to digital marketing team, then they get your website, and then this is a problem I had previous to the website when I was with my PMS. People would call me. I'm on the phone. They say, I put in my credit card information. I get the spinning wheel. I must have had 100 of those calls. That's, I knew I had to go. But again, it all comes down to the quality of your website and how much you're going to spend on it, and can it convert?
It's the modern day storefront, right? This is your storefront,
Yeah.
for
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things too, and it's not always cost. I mean, we talked about value earlier, right? Some of it is like you can spend a lot of money on a website and not get a great website, and then we've worked with some providers, over the past few years, our clients have who didn't charge a lot, but do a great job and things like that. So yeah, I think always getting a few quotes, looking at what they've done, I think that's better. Like, show me the last 4 websites you launched. Like, let me look at these and see how they look. I think it's a good way to kind of get the direct
And if we
output.
talk about direct bookings, we
Mhm.
talked about owner acquisition not being word of mouth not being a very good strategy. Repeat guests is not a real good strategy either. It means you're doing a good job, but if you're not growing organically, it's not a good strategy.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, Terry, I think we got 2 more that I can kind of bring together, I think, to bring us all the way home here on this. And we really appreciate you having us with here today. I think it's been really good to kind of hear your perspective. So number 9 and 10, I'm going to put those together: not having a clear budget and not having a clear business plan. So what's kind of been your evolution in that process of building a budget, building a business plan to get you where you are today?
They kind of go hand in hand. And to be quite honest with you, I still don't have a good business plan. I don't have a good budget. So I've learned a lot along the way. Do I have more to learn? Yeah, I do. Outpacing your competition, having the highest occupancy, having the highest ADR is nice to say. It's nice to have. It's what drives me. It's what I try to do, but it's still not a good business plan. It's not a budget. So I still have a long way to go there.
Nice. Well, I like that, Brooke, right? Because it's kind of proof that like this is all a work in progress. Like we can make positive steps forward, but at the end of the day, every single operator out there still knows they've got a few things that they've got to tune up and work on, even if they've been as successful as Terry has, for sure.
Yeah, and I'll give you a good example. There is my advertising budget. Every year, I dread this every single year when we go to meet our accountant at the end of the year to do our tax return, and he says to me, "Do you know what you spent on advertising?" And then he gives me the number, and my wife looks at me and says, "You can't be serious." So that's, yeah, I dread that every single year.
I love that. Here's my thing. Like, look, I went to business school. It's like they talk about all these, like, you need a business plan and everything else. BS. Like, come on. Like, I don't know. Like, I guess there's something to be said about like building it out. But realistically, like, you don't know what's going to happen. It's about like just starting small, taking small steps, and iterating and evolving, because the plan that you create in the beginning is not the plan that's going to be in the end. You know what I mean? So like building out this 5-year, business plan, when there's a 99.9% chance that that's not going to come to fruition. Like, yes, it's good to think it through, but realistically, you just need to get started. You got to get started. You got to iterate. You got to pivot, and don't overthink things. The people that are most successful are the ones that make quick decisions and they iterate and they learn from it. For me, really, the business plan, and I've shared this multiple times. My business plan was building out a pro forma. And that's how I would run my businesses. And I would constantly update it as I got more and more information. And I could see the little metrics and see how changing small little movements to like maybe a guest fee or a security deposit insurance fee, something like that, how that had such an impact, down. I mean, that was, I think, one of the biggest epiphanies for me one time. It was like, we were losing money. And I literally moved our security deposit insurance from like $39 to $79. And we instantly went from losing money to making money the next year. Little tiny tweaks like that. So that was my business plan, was really building it out through a spreadsheet, those pro formas.
You're making me feel better about my inadequacies.
Well, I think 2 things I would say there, Brooke. There's 2 quotes that are basically the same thing, but they're both good, so I'll give them both. I think the Tyson one is everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So that seems like what a small business is. Like, I've got a plan, and then you quite literally get punched in the mouth by, owners, guests, whatever the case may be. The other one, Shunju, I think, is no plan survives first contact with the enemy. So it's like no business plan survives first contact with like a customer or like an upset owner or marketing problems or whatever. They're kind of both the same thing, but it illustrates the point of like writing a plan is great. Knowing where you want to go, I think, is great. I think it is useful to like try to think a few steps ahead, but chess, the other people are moving too. You may have a plan, but like your plan can get sideways pretty quickly if unforeseen things happen to you. So I guess that's
100%.
Yeah. Well, Brooke, I think you got one more question for Terry to kind of round us out here, and then I think we can put a bow on this one.
Yeah. Well, Terry, thanks again for coming on. It was a real honor to have you on here. But if you could go back in time and go back to your 25-year-old self and give him a little bit of advice, what would it be?
You have to spend money to make it. No truer words. I can't tell you I waited years and years and years too long. I should have made the move years and years before I did, to that. It cost me.
Yeah. I like that though. It's a simple one. So
Yeah.
fantastic. Again, Terry, thank you so much, and appreciate your kind words to me on this episode. It means a lot to work with you as well. So that's it. If you made it all the way to the end of the episode, dear listener, we thank you. We appreciate you. We need you to do one thing for us, and that's leave us a review in your podcast app of choice. iTunes, Spotify listeners, you are where we get the most downloads. Therefore, we benefit the most if you leave us a review. Well, we'll take one anywhere. We're not that picky. It won't cost you anything, so it's not going to cost you any money, but you get some benefit out of that. To Terry's example there, which is more people can listen to the podcast and awesome folks like Terry in our industry. So we thank you again. We'll catch everybody on the next episode. Thanks so much.